So I'm starting by taping a 6x6 square of paper to a board. You could work on any size, and taping is not absolutely mandatory, but it is quite helpful because we're going to be working wet in wet. The first thing I need to do is decide about my horizon line. I have a choice to make. And I need to decide if I'm going to have it occur at the bottom 1/3 of my space, or if I'm going to divide my picture surface so that the horizon happens at the top 1/3 of my space. That is all the sketching that I'm going to do within the context of this painting, and it's all the sketching that I need to do. And in all honesty, once you've gotten used to eyeballing these distances, you don't necessarily have to keep sketching this line. I'm sketching it with a water-soluble pencil, so the line is going to rapidly disappear, and that's fine. I have a good estimate of where my horizon is going to occur, and I'm deciding to do this 1/3 of the way up my sheet. My next step is to thoroughly wet my paper. I'm using a hake brush to do this, and I'm not scrubbing too aggressively at my paper, but I am making sure that the paper is completely wet and that the water works its way into the cold-pressed fibers of my watercolor sheet. I've set aside a little bit of my Payne's gray, and my first step is to pick up a highly dilute wash, a very light, very pale wash of this color. I'm going to use a 1/2-inch wash brush to paint the majority of this painting. If you don't have a fancy pointed oval shape like mine, a flat brush is totally fine and will do all of the same things. And it's a little difficult to see, but there is a lot of water on this brush and barely any of my paint. I have nothing else in this palette cup right now, just some paint and mostly water. I'm going to paint an uneven spotting across the sky portion of my piece, which is that upper 2/3. As I start to approach my horizon line, I take water and paint out of my brush, and I work a very light removal of paint across the horizon line right above it. And I actually start removing paint from my brush with a bit of water and using my brush to work itself back up into this spotted darker area on my page. I'm removing paint, I'm lightening the value, and I'm going back in and adding a little bit of a deepening of the value in certain spots, concentrating these spots up toward the top of my paper, a little darker at the very top, and getting lighter and lighter as we work our way down. However, I want to keep this coverage a bit uneven. That's how I get the sense of clouds. I tip my board and paper up so that gravity starts to affect the paint. And if I see hard lines, I use the tip of my brush to break the surface tension and to get that paint to soften up and move. So this is fine, it looks good, and any further working of the paint is liable to cause more problems than alleviate them. So I'm going to leave my sky area alone right now. I'm going to add 3 drops of my liquid gum arabic mixture to my paint, and I'm going to work those things together. This mixture of gum arabic and paint is what I'm going to use to paint across the horizon. And I'm going to cover the area of the ground in my painting with this mixture. It's a medium gray, about as dark as some of the clouds up in the sky. This area is going to get this dark or darker, so I can work my brush to cover all of the white. The addition of gum arabic will allow my paint to charge into the wet area of water on the page, so it will start to take hold and start to travel and start to move in this wet puddle. But unlike plain water, paint and gum arabic and water mixed together will start to slow some of the edge transitions. So it will slow down that reaction where the water and the paint just kind of mix together. If I don't have gum arabic in my mixture, these beautiful sort of feathering, uneven patterns that I'm able to dot onto my page are going to melt away and disappear entirely, and I'll just get a soft edge. Because of the gum arabic, some of that patterning will stay present in the paint as it dries. I add a dark mixture of my Payne's Gray to my brush with additional gum arabic in it, a little bit, a drop or two or three, added at all times. And I use the very tip of my brush, which has been dipped into this more concentrated mixture of paint. And this is what I use to dot this uneven, wavy line across my horizon line. These trees now terminate about a third of the way up the page. It's a little taller than ideal, but it will work. For foreground trees, if I want them, I use the same technique, but this time I have paint that's practically right out of the tube. A super dark, sticky, thick concentration of paint. I have to add a little bit of water just to get it to move at all. And I have a dot or two of my gum arabic fluid in this mix as well. This slows down the reaction. So these trees are going to have fuzzy edges, soft branches, but they're not just going to bleed outward into a soft amorphous blob. That's the purpose of adding the gum arabic mixture to my paint. And because I've layered my timing, because I've stacked my timing so that the softest things, the clouds, those go right into wet water at the very start. They have plenty of time to soften up. The second softest things, which is that tree line at my horizon, that gets a little less time. It's on a page that's a little bit drier. And then the third darkest area, these really dark trees in the foreground, these get staggered and stacked layers of paint. You notice that I'm just dotting this in. It is syrupy, thick, super dark, but it has a little bit of additional gum arabic mixture in it. So now I'm done. I'm just going to let this dry, cross my fingers, and hope that some of the beautiful textures that we see happening already don't spread out and fan out altogether too much. If I get more bleeding, more softening, and just more breakup of my shapes than I want, it means I need to try this again with more gum arabic. But let's let this dry and see how it looks. So as you will notice, my shapes have spread out and feathered out quite a bit. They have very soft and fuzzy edges. However, the additional gum arabic in my water has kept these shapes from spreading out altogether. They still maintain some of the characteristics that they had when they were wet. Additionally, you'll notice that my values have shifted a bit lighter. This is totally normal for watercolor. Now, I'm pretty happy with what I have, but I feel that this overall loss of detail is one of those things that's really nice to contrast a little bit. And what I like to do is use materials that give me a lot of precision in contrast to these lines and shapes that have lost all of their precision. So we have something that's very soft and very vague, and then by using some light values of colored pencil and watercolor pencil, I'm able to work some of these highlight ideas back into the piece, and I'm able to introduce some marks that have a very different feel and characteristic because they're very precise in how they're laid down. The colors I'm using are light neutrals, and I like to just maintain a little collection of neutral colors of watercolor pencils and pastel pencils and regular colored pencils, all different manufacturers, all different levels of quality. These are carandache, and I'm using a white polychromos. I also like to add in just a few little speckles and dots of white jelly roll ink. The pen that I like to use is the Bold, the 1mm jelly roll. I find that this behaves the best, and I like adding a little bit of this kind of playful and improbable sense of sparkle. The dots don't have to line up perfectly with the branches. This is just a fun little piece, and keeping things a little bit impossible, a little bit unlikely, is a way that I feel like we can add a little bit of levity, a little bit of playfulness into this otherwise very dark and moody piece by just adding a speckling of little white ink dots. And now I can remove my tape and I can take a moment and sign my work, and you can see right here how it is very process light, very fast, and very easy to get a very satisfying little landscape. So, knowing where to put our horizon is so much of painting landscape. Once that decision has been locked in, you can see right here that it only takes a very simple series of additional decisions in order to create something that is really satisfying to look at. It does not have to be hard, it does not have to be painful, and it does not have to be terribly labor intensive.